خير المسؤولين وأوسع المعطين. اشف به صدورنا وأذهب به غيظ قلوبنا، واهدنا به لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك، إنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراط مستقيم. وانصرنا به على عدوك وعدونا إله الحق. آمين. اللهم إنا نشكو إليك فقد نبينا صلواتك عليه وآله، وغيبة ولينا، وكثرة عدونا، وقلة عددنا، وشدة الفتن بنا، وتظاهر الزمان علينا. فصل على محمد وآل محمد، وأعنا على ذلك بفتح منك تعجله، وبضر تكشفه، ونصر تعزه، وسلطان حق تظهره، ورحمة منك تجللناها، وعاقبة منك تلبسناها برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم برحمتك في الصالحين فأدخلنا، وفي عليين فارفعنا، وبكأس من عين سلسبيل فاسقنا، ومن الحور العين برحمتك فزوجنا، ومن الولدان المخلدين كأنهم لؤلؤ مكنون فأخدمنا، ومن ثمار الجنة ولحوم الطير فأطعمنا، ومن ثياب السندس والحرير والاستبرق فألبسنا، وليلة القادر وحج بيتك الحرام وقتلا في سبيلك فوفق لنا، وصالح الدعاء والمسألة فاستجب لنا. وإذا جمعت الأولين والآخرين يوم القيامة فارحمنا، وبراءة من النار فاكتب لنا، وفي جهنم فلا تغلنا، وفي جهنم فلا تغلنا، وفي عذابك وهوانك فلا تبتلنا، ومن الزقوم والضريع فلا تطعمنا، ومع الشياطين فلا تجعلنا، وفي النار على وجوهنا فلا تكببنا، ومن ثياب النار وسرابيل القطران فلا تلبسنا، ومن كل سوء يا لا إله إلا أنت، بحق لا إله إلا أنت فنجنا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك أن تجعل فيما تقضي وتقدر من الأمر المحتوم في الأمر الحكيم، من القضاء الذي لا يرد ولا يبدل، أن تكتبنا من حجاج بيتك الحرام المبرور حجهم، المشكور سعيهم، المغفور ذنوبهم، المكفر عن سيئاتهم، وأن تجعل فيما تقضي وتقدر أن تطيل أعمارنا في خير وعافية، وتوسع في أرزاقنا، وتجعلنا ممن ننتصر به لدينك، ولا تستبدل بنا غيرنا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بجلال وجهك الكريم أن ينقضي عنا شهر رمضان، أو يطلع الفجر من ليلتنا هذه، ولك قبلنا تبعة أو ذنب تعذبنا عليه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم اجعل فيما تقضي وتقدر من الأمر المحتوم، فيما تفرق من الأمر الحكيم في ليلة القادر، أن تجعلني من حجاج بيتك الحرام المبرور حجهم، المشكور سعيهم، المغفور ذنوبهم، وأسألك أن تطيل في عمري في طاعتك، وتوسع في رزقي يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على محمد وآل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. الفاتحة. على أرواح محمد وآل محمد، وعلى أرواح أول أمواتكم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك وأتوجه إليك بنبيك نبي الرحمة محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. يا أبا القاسم يا رسول الله يا إمام الرحمة يا سيدنا ومولانا، إن توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيحا عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيحا عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا فاطمة الزهراء يا بنت محمد يا قرة عين الرسول يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا، إن توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيحة عند الله، اشفعي لنا عند الله. يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها المجتبى يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيحا عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي أيها الشهيد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا، إن توجهنا واستشفعنا به وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن الحسين يا زين العابدين يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا، إن توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيحا عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها الباقر يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا عبد الله يا جعفر بن محمد أيها الصادق يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إن توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا موسى بن جعفر، أيها الكاظم يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إن توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى، أيها الرضا يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إن توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي، أيها التقي الجواد يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إن توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن محمد، أيها الحادي النقي يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إن توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي، أيها الزكي العسكري يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا وسي الحسن والخلف الحجة، أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إن توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا يا سادتي وموالي إني توجهت بكم أئمتي وعدتي ليوم فقر وحاجتي إلى الله وتوسلت بكم إلى الله واستشفعت بكم إلى الله فاشفعوا لي عند الله واستنقذوني من ذنوبي عند الله فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله وبحبكم وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله فكونوا عند الله وجائي يا سادتي يا أولياء الله صلى الله عليهم أجمعين ولعن الله أعداء الله ظالميهم من الأولين والآخرين آمين رب العالمين.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتحدون، الذي لا يدركه بعد الحمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا، سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم، وأحلى بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين صاحب العصر والزمان، خليفة الرحمن إمام الإنس والجان، ولعن الله أعداهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله وقوله الحق: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، وقرآنا فرقناه لتقرأه على الناس على مكث ونزلناه تنزيلا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. The gradual nature of the Deen has been our ongoing topic. Tonight is lecture number 7. First of all, let me offer my condolences to the Imam of our time, the Rahbar of the Ummah, the Maraji, all of you, on today being the day of the Shahadat of Amir al-Mu'mineen, alayhi salatu wassalam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our grief, convert that grief into the softness of our hearts, and allow that now to be the catalyst for our change. May Allah accept our amal from last night, accept our fasting so far in the month of Ramadan, and elevate us in this month such that when we leave this month, we are different from when we enter this month. Our discussion for the past week now, and we're about halfway through our lecture series now, and for the first half of the lecture series, we were trying to establish the base that the Deen has always been a gradual process, a slow, meticulous, inch-by-inch crawl towards God. Never a race, never a competition, always a journey. And using the various ahadith in the first few lectures, a number of verses to show that this is a path in our journey, we kind of built that base so that we can really kind of focus on the second half of this lecture series, where now we'll talk about now implementing this gradual change in the form of habits. Living a life of purpose, being conscious in what we do. A lot of what we do in this world, and this world is a world that is, consistently numbing us and not allowing us now to handle our issues, tackle our realities, right? وَمَا هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا لَحْوًا وَلَعَبٌ, the Quran says, that life in this world is nothing but lahwi. It's a sport, it's a play, it's fuzuli. It's made to distract us from our actual purpose. And the more we engulf ourselves in these numbing devices, the more we move away from our purpose and hadaf. And so last night now, I spoke a little bit about the idea of habit building. And the concept now that, we have to understand that incremental change and this drastic change that I'm after all comes from a compounding reality. Meaning what? That inch by inch now, maybe things that may not, make a big impact on a daily basis, but over the spread of time, after a month, 6 months to a year, you'll begin to see that change. Provided we cross that plateau, right? We get there, we cross it over, and then we begin to see changes. Remember my example of the ice cube yesterday? Remember my example of the stone cutter as well yesterday, right? After 98, 99 hammerings on the rock, it's the 100th, 101st strike that splits the rock open, right? That now has gone over the threshold of the plateau. In tonight's discussion, I want to further along this talk. And remember, I left you guys last night talking about the fact that part of the reason why we don't really adopt a change, embrace a change, look for a change, is because of the fact that some of us have spiritual anxiety. We have this fear of spirituality. I talked about sometimes people approaching the nights of Qadr with a pit in their stomach, right? This nervousness, this intimidation, the fact that one night, 12 months of my destiny will be written. What if I mess that night up? What if I don't focus the way I should be? What if I don't ask for the right things? What if my wudu was wrong? I don't know. And so, a lot of pressure is placed on that one night to the point where people just kind of, they close their eyes, they get through it, and then they're relieved that it's done. In the meantime, that opportunity now to seize one moment with Allah, such that that worship now engraves itself to your soul, was lost. All due to the fact that, we have spiritual anxiety. We have this fear that I'm not doing it right. And that stems from a deeper and maybe a more triggered process where God was always presented to us as an entity that's very difficult to please. And so we kind of took ourselves out of the race. So you know what? I lost. I'm not going to even attempt to compete. I am okay where I am, and I accept now complacency. This cycle is difficult. And a lot of us, I think, either we're conscious of it or it's subconscious. We are really, really entrenched in this process. And that's a good segue to tonight's discussion, where now I kind of, I want to make a connection between the idea of habit building and our identity. Okay, and really truly understand the concept and the idea that, gradual change only becomes effective when it's parts of our identity. Okay, and slowly but surely we have to move from what we do to who we are. Okay, so examples I'll give you is that there are two people who are who've denied a cigarette request. Okay, let's say a person comes and offers each of them a cigarette, and they both say no. One person says that, no thank you, I'm trying to quit. The second guy says, no thank you, I no longer smoke. Both of them obviously come from the same history where they were smokers at one moment, but now, of course, they are no longer smokers. One now says, I'm trying to quit, which means that, he hasn't truly embraced the identity of not being a smoker. The second one has, where he says, look, I'm not trying to quit. I'm no longer a smoker. I no longer identify with this horrendous habit, right? I mean, it's a small change in words, but it speaks volumes, right? The second one focused on the identity of being a smoker. The first one identified with the act of smoking. Okay. When we begin to realize that we are conscious of certain parts of our identity that we are very prideful of, that we actually are proud of, that we think, I'm doing this very well. For example, I dress very well. For example, And so when I go shopping or when I shop online for an outfit, there's an immense amount of pride I take into the process. I'm conscious, I'm aware, I know what I want. I'm confident in my abilities. Why? Because I have a history in my own right to be somebody who is a good dresser. I am a good basketball player. And so when it's time to now play a pickup sport, I actually now end up like I said, investing in myself for that craft. Because I see myself not as someone who plays basketball, I see myself as a good basketball player. The act of shooting the ball has now integrated into my identity. When those things now make sense to me, and not only that, I actually feel good about them, then I start to now consciously now move towards perfecting that craft of mine, right? So I go from trying to read a book to becoming a reader, trying to run in a marathon to becoming a runner, trying to, let's say, pray salat to being subservient to God. Do you see the difference? So no longer am I praying salat because it's wajib on me. I'm praying salat because I want to be a servant of Allah. Okay, and we have to begin now to make a clear distinction between the act and the identity by which that act now builds. The example I'll give you is Shaitan. Shaitan now, for 4,000 years, some say, worshipped Allah. The act of worship was to the point where he was revered and respected by the angels and the jinn alike, right? He was the peacock, the beauty, the ta'us of the worshippers of God. He was seen as somebody who was revered and respected until that moment came where he was tested now with the hukam, the command now to bow down to Adam. And as you know, he refused, right? So while he was busy worshiping Allah for 4,000 years, he didn't allow that worship to trickle into his identity. So let me say this, he became an abid of Allah, didn't become an abd of Allah. And now there's a big difference. One is the act of ibadat, one is the ubudiyat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One is to pray to Allah, one is to be subservient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What we want in this idea of the gradual change of the deen is to now begin now to what? To adopt a identity towards our deen. That no longer do I perform religious acts. I'm actually a religious person. I'm not fasting, I'm the faster. I'm not praying, I'm the prayer. Okay? Now, how do we get there? We have to understand that the more pride we have towards our identity, the more we will work to improve it. Like I said, examples I gave you, everything from, if I am concerned about my fade and my haircut and my beard, every 10 days, every 12 days, I'll drop $20 and I'll make sure that I'm always fresh. My lineup is nice, my trim is nice, my fade is nice. I don't let it outgrow. I take immense pride in the way that my hair looks and my beard looks. Small examples. If I take immense pride in my spirituality, I'll make sure that any opportunity I get now to increase that spirituality and perfect that spirituality, I will take it. Okay? And that now involves me taking the idea of worship to be an obligation to now being a source of pride for me. In the world of theology, when the ulama describe what deen is, deen, there's a lughawi discussion, there's an istilahi discussion, right? In the kitab of lughat, in the dictionary meaning of deen could mean anything from submission, it could mean anything from worship, it could mean a lot of things. But in the istilahi, everyday, common discussion on what deen is, deen has to be seen everywhere, to the point where our actions now become our thought very easily. Our actions become our essence very easily. We go from fi'l to malaka to khulq, from fail to khulq to malaka to dhat. Meaning what? I go from one action, I repeat that action over and over and over again. It becomes part of my khulq, my behavior, and that's where akhlaq comes from khulq. If I continue to repeat that behavior, it becomes part of my malaka or my disposition. I do things without knowing it. I do things without thinking about it, good or bad, by the way. There are some of us who have habitual sinning problems. We habitually sin to the point where it doesn't even feel good anymore, but I can't shake it. It's been with me since I was 15, 16 years old. The last stage of this chain now is it becomes part of my thought, part of my essence. I'm known for that. I go from smoking to becoming a smoker. I go from drinking alcohol to becoming an alcoholic. I go from a few trips to the casino to now becoming a gambler. Okay? In the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes that moment where the adab now comes down on the nation of Nuh, of Prophet Noah, obviously now this torrential rainfall comes now, the flood is increasing, the damage has begun, and Nabi Nuh, being a father now, his fitr takes over, he goes frantically looking for his son. That where is my son, where is my son? And he's told by Allah, Ya Nuhu innahu laysa min ahlik. He's not from your ahl. But then Allah says something very peculiar. He says, innahu amalun ghayru salih. That Allah does not say he's a person who performs despicable acts or unrighteous acts. No. The verse literally translates as he is the manifestation of those unrighteous acts. He's become the acts. So it's very possible now that the movement goes from what we do to who we are. Okay? So part of the gradual change, why it's so hard for us to change sometimes, because we haven't attached it to our identity. Okay? We do that. Now, that is all there. Inshallah, that made sense to all of you. I really hope I took it slowly and that all made sense to you. Now, the problem is this. This is where the problem lies in. And we'll, like I said, we'll build on that every single night now until the end of the month now, which is a matter of a week away. The problem is that we, as we get older now, we become set in our ways. And I want you to follow this very carefully, especially, some of you who are now getting a little bit older now, your beard is white a little bit, and let's understand this process very well. Once we've adopted a certain portion of our identity, we end up paying allegiance to that portion. Okay? Let me say that one more time. Once we begin to adopt a certain portion of our identity, this is who I am now. Okay? I've known now for the past 30, 40 years of my life, this is who I am. Okay? I've embraced it to the point where now I pay allegiance to it. Meaning what? I do anything it wants me to do. If, for example, I'm a good dresser. I dress well. That's better English. I dress well. Now to the point where to maintain that, and I've embraced it, I love the fact that, I have self-respect. Wherever I go now, I look decent. And, yes, if that means I spend some money on it, that's fine. To the point where people actually spend money they don't have just to maintain that portion of their identity because they now believe in that portion. They have pride in that portion. They want to now maintain and help that portion grow. So sometimes it'll be to the point where they'll go beyond their means just to maintain that portion of their identity. I hope that makes sense, okay? But what ends up happening is that any movement for a change now is met with the idea that, look, this is not who I am, okay? So we pay allegiance to that identity to the point where we don't believe I could be anybody else. This is who I've been for the past 5, 10 years. I can't change myself. Okay, so now if you have dressed a certain way, for example, and someone comes along and says, maybe you should loosen up your clothing. Maybe you should begin to wear hijab, for example. Maybe you should begin to kind of, grow out the beard. Maybe you should begin to act modestly in front of those who are non-mahram. Because now you're in your 40s and 50s and 60s, and now that portion of your identity, now you've really paid allegiance to, any change would be a change in yourself. And that's very hard to do. So we end up saying things like, yeah, that's not who I am. That might be you. It's not who I am. Okay? We've heard that a lot, right? You might want to try to smile more. Yeah, I don't really, you might want to, and so we end up just accepting these truths about ourselves And in the process now, what we're telling ourselves is I can't change, right? We say things like, I'm not a morning person. Okay. I'm not good at math. I'm not very, savvy with with technology, for example, right? I'm not religious like you are, Maulana. I get that so much. I say it all the time. People who do so much great work for humanity, who have values and morals that they don't shake for anybody. Yeah, maybe bidahir, in the apparent, they're not religious. Maybe, the beard needs to come. Maybe the hijab needs to be on. Maybe, what might look the part of a believer is not there. And I'm not condoning the idea that you can look how you want to look for. Islam has an outward appearance for sure that has to be respected. But nonetheless, they've taken the idea that, and they have accepted the fact that I'm not religious. देखो मैं इतना दीनदार नहीं हूं जैसे आप हैं, I'm not like you. I get that a lot. Meanwhile, this man does more for humanity than I would never. Volunteers his time, writes a check, for example, right? Works very hard for his family, right? Whenever anybody needs anything, he's the first one there. He might miss a few namazes here and there. Again, not condoning it or condemning it. Sorry, condoning it. But for him to accept the fact that he's not religious is him now accepting that this is not part of my identity. Okay, that's a problem, and that becomes a barrier in this gradual change process. The barrier is that, well, we've kind of succumbed to the fact this is who I am now. I'm set in my ways. I'm not going to change myself. When in reality, that's not the case at all. There's never a moment where we can't change. Yes, as you get older, it gets more difficult for sure. But in the eyes of God now, because really now we should begin to adopt an identity that resembles how God sees us. There's no point of no return for God. There's never a moment where God says, look, you're coming to me in your 70s, wanting to change? Too late. I'm not going to change your akhlaq. No, if you're sincere, then absolutely. Look at this verse from Surah Taha, and I'll use this now as a segue into my masayib. Surah Taha, verse number 44. Let me paint the picture for you. This is one of those moments in the story of Nabi Musa that I find to be absolutely incredible. It's a very well-known verse, but one that I want you to look at it through the lens of our discussion that we've had for about now, close to about half an hour. Nabi Musa alayhi salam comes back from his 10 years with Nabi Shuaib. On his way back to Egypt now, he's made a prophet, as you know, enters Egypt now, a prophet of God. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now tells him, now you are to go to Fir'aun. He says, I need some help, right? I'm a little bit, apprehensive about this whole process. He goes, fine, I'll give you and your brother go. You and Harun go towards Fir'aun. Okay? All right. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs him on how to speak to Fir'aun. Very carefully. He says, verse number 44 of Surah Taha, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, when you speak to Fir'aun about me, فَقُولَ لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا, speak to him with a soft tone, a naram lahaja, as you say, right? لَعَلَّهُ يَتَذَكَّرُ أَوْ يَخْشَى. Maybe, this part's incredible to me, maybe he might have some dhikr for me, remember me, or some khushu in his heart for me, right? Some softness, some remembrance, some presence of me in his heart. Who are we talking about here, guys? Fir'aun. Okay? Fir'aun. Fir'aun believed in one God, but he believed in a God that was the God of all other gods. Always remember that. Okay? When you look at him and the likes of Queen Bilqis and Nabi Sulaiman's story and all these different personalities that the Quran talks about, these are people who believed in one God, but they believed in one God to be very limited. He had a certain role, did his role. Now the small gods on this earth are now, I am the god of Egypt, for example. She's the god of Saba in Yemen, for example, right? He is the god of all us gods, but we are, the small G god to the big G gods. But anyways, that of course, would walk around saying, I am your Rabb, I am your Lord. That kind of person, a tyrant, an oppressor, who kept the people of Egypt under his dominating rule, Allah is saying, maybe Musa, maybe with your soft tongue, there might be dhikr and khushu' in the heart of Fir'aun. Fir'aun, guys. Meaning this is telling me that even when it comes to someone like Fir'aun, God says, there's always a chance to change. Always a chance to change. And part of it is, you know what, I'm sorry, this culture of ours will sit there and say, bro, you do you, man. Keep it real, right? I can't stand that advice. It bothers me. And a lot of my youth now, they hashtag this, they include this, they think, oh yeah, that's great advice. Hey man, I'm just keeping it real, right? This is who I am. I don't want to be fake. We think that if I change the way I've been for the past 20 years, I'm not true to myself. Because why? I have been subservient and I have paid allegiance to my identity for so many years that I don't want to now desert that identity. I don't want to for a second change the way I dress, change the way I talk, what I eat, who I hang out with. No, this is who I am. Why are you trying to change me? Right? I get that a lot. Don't change me. Who are you to change who I am? Right? And so we've kind of put that barrier that, you know what, change can't happen. Right? So a person who is real to himself will sit there and say, yeah, when I'm angry, bro, I tell it how it is. I tell exactly the person, I speak my mind, I don't hold back, I let the person know this is why I'm angry, right? And if I say, look, maybe you shouldn't say everything. Maybe if you're angry, you should try to, look at who you're angry at and maybe try to adopt a softer tone, right? You don't have to say everything. No. Look, man, I'm real, bro. I got to keep it real with myself. I have to keep it real with myself, which means that if I have been a horrible person my whole life, I'm going to maintain that horrible nature of myself because that's being true to myself. It's horrendous advice. Horrendous. Allah saying even the likes of Fir'aun could adopt possibly the dhikr of God and khushu in his heart. My sisters and my brothers, this is not an easy task, but this is the month to do it. Let's understand that if we attach the idea of habits to our identity and we find pride in our spiritual identity, and I'll speak a little bit more about that tomorrow night, pride in our spiritual identity, then those habits don't become daunting. They don't result in a pit in my stomach. They don't result in me having spiritual anxiety. They actually are welcomed. And bit by bit now, I begin to crawl towards God to the point, like I said last night, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لِنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. That now with this struggle now, Allah opens up the path and the doors that we never thought was there. The day of the Shahadat of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Maulana now has suffered for 3 days. Like I mentioned last night, if any of you have ever watched your parents now pass away in a very difficult way, through cancer, a disease, an illness, it's very hard to watch this pillar of strength for you, the roots of your tree now, get weaker and weaker. The state of Amir al-Mu'mineen before now he passed away was to a point where the poison had reached the heels of his feet. The band-aid had camouflaged itself against the skin and the tone of the color of the skin of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And like I said last night now, in the middle of the night now, his children, as close companions now buried Amir al-Mu'mineen. Every year on this day, I always tell this story because to me it's one of the heart-wrenching stories that I have read, and one that I think encompasses who left this world today. Emotionally drained now, the children and the family of Amir al-Mu'mineen come back towards the home after burying their father. In the middle of the night, as I said, Imam Ali was buried. Imam Hassan now on his way back could hear the sound of a man crying. he approaches this man and he asks this man, is everything all right? Is there something I can get you? You're quite upset. This was an old blind man sitting there and just weeping with himself. And the old man says to Imam Hassan that it's been three nights and he hasn't come for 3 nights. He would come every single night. He would sit with me. He would keep me company. He would give me hope. He'd make me feel like I had somebody in this world. But for the past 3 nights, my friend, the person who suffered with me, who was in pain with me, I don't know what I've done to upset him. I don't know why he's left me, but for 3 nights I haven't seen him. I don't know where he is. I don't even know who to ask. Imam Hassan realized that he was speaking about his Baba Ali. Imam Hassan now begins to ask, now, do you know who this person is? Did he tell you his name, anything about himself? I would keep asking him, who are you? Where are you from? What is your name? But he kept saying that my name is not important. The same way that you are now faqir, I am faqir as well. The same way that you don't have anybody in this world, I also don't have anybody in this world. The same way you have complaints and pains, I also have complaints and pains. If you have scars, I have scars. Let us sit together in our own pain. He would never tell me his name, never tell me who he was. He just made me feel like I had somebody in this world I could lean on, but I don't know where he is. When Imam Hassan now told him this was Amir al-Mu'mineen, my father, the Imam of the time, he's passed away from this poisonous sword, the man begins to cry and cry, and then he asked Imam Mustafa, can you please take me to your father's grave? Imam Hassan takes this old blind man slowly, leaves him at the grave of Amir al-Mu'mineen. This man slowly approaches the grave of Amir al-Mu'mineen, falls down on the grave, picks up the khak. Hey Maulana, please accept my apology. I had no idea it was you. If there's any gustakhi, any sort of disrespect, please. Had I known it was you, I wouldn't have said the things that you said. I wouldn't have done the things that I did. Please, I have no idea. If only one more night I could be with you. This was who Ali was. This was the heart of Ali. This was the one who has left us today. Now Hassan is yatim today. Hussein is yatim today. Zainab bin Kulthum is yatim today. We ask Imam Zamana, please, all those orphans all over the world today, give them that guidance, give them that strength for the sake of Amir al-Mu'mineen today. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to accept our qaleel ibadat, inshallah. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the past 4 days now we have grieved over Amir al-Mu'mineen. We ask you, Allah, to convert that grief into emulation, understand the legacy he left behind, and with these tears, with the softness of the heart, we pray to Allah, Allah, please, let's not just grieve for Maulana Ali. Let's do our best now to ask, what does he want from us? Let's imitate him, emulate him. Let's tread the path of the Sunnah and Sira. I ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's only a matter of a few days left in the month of Ramadan. Please, if you have not forgiven us yet, please, Allah, I beg you, please forgive us. Accept our amal. Look at us with your eyes of mercy, not your eyes of justice. I ask you, tomorrow night is the night of Qadr. Allah, please give us a tawfiq to benefit from that night to the best of our ability. Do us a favor, Allah, please. Look at us with your grace and allow us to be a different version of ourselves before we started, such that now when the month of Ramadan is over and shaitan's now impact once again resumes, that we have now the strength to handle all those forces outside of us and also inside of us. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن علي ولي الله أشهد أن علي حجة الله حي على السلام حي على السلاح حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله
کسی بھی اہم امر کے پیش آنے، مصیبت کے نازل ہونے اور رنج و غم و اندوہ کے موقع پر حضرت امام زین العابدین علیہ السلام کی دعا۔
بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم۔
شروع نام سے اللہ کے جو بڑا مہربان نہایت رحم کرنے والا ہے۔
یا من تحل به عقد المکارم ویا من یفأ به حد الشدائد۔
اے وہ جس کے ذریعے ناگوار حالات کے عقدے کھل جاتے ہیں، اور اے وہ جس کے سبب سے سختیوں کی باڑھ کند ہو جاتی ہے۔
ويا من يلتمس منه المخرج إلى روح الفرج ذلت لقدرتك الصعاب۔
اور اے وہ جس سے وسعت و اطمینان کی طرف جانے کا راستہ مانگا جاتا ہے، تیری قدرت کے سامنے سختیاں نرم ہو گئیں۔
وتسببت بلطفك الأسباب وجرى بقدرتك القضاء۔
اور تیرے ہی لطف سے اسباب فراہم ہو گئے، اور تیری ہی قوت سے فیصلے نافذ ہو گئے۔
ومضت على إرادتك الأشياء فهي بمشيتك دون قولك مؤتمرا۔
اور تیرے ہی ارادے سے تمام چیزیں چل رہی ہیں کہ وہ تیری مشیت کی بلا کہے پابند ہیں۔
وبإرادتك دون نهيك منزجرا، أنت المدعو للمهمات وأنت المفزع في الملمات۔
اور تیرے ارادے کے سامنے بغیر منع کیے ہوئے رکی ہوئی ہیں۔ تو ہی ہے جسے اہم امور میں پکارا جاتا ہے، اور تو ہی ہے جس سے مشکلات میں پناہ مانگی جاتی ہے۔
لا يندفع منها إلا ما دفعت ولا ينكشف منها إلا ما كشفت۔
کوئی مصیبت تیرے بغیر رفع نہیں ہو سکتی ہے، اور کوئی مشکل تیرے بغیر حل نہیں ہو سکتی ہے۔
وقد نزل بي يا رب ما قد تكأدني ثقل وألم بي ما قد بهضني حمل۔
اس وقت میرے اوپر وہ مصیبت نازل ہو گئی ہے جس کے بوجھ نے مجھے تھکا دیا ہے، اور وہ آفت آ پڑی ہے جس کی سنگینی نے مجھے عاجز کر دیا ہے۔
وبقدرتك أوردته علي وبسلطانك وجهته إلي۔
تو نے ہی اسے اپنی قدرت سے وارد کیا ہے، اور تو نے ہی اپنی طاقت سے اس کا رخ میری طرف موڑ دیا ہے۔
فلا مصدر لما أوردت ولا صارف لما وجهت ولا فاتح لما أغلقت۔
اور اب وارد ہو جانے والے کو نکالنے والا، اور آنے والے کو موڑنے والا، اور بند دروازوں کا کھولنے والا۔
ولا مغلق لما فتحت ولا ميسر لما عسرت ولا ناصر لمن خذلت۔
اور کھلے راستوں کا بند کرنے والا، اور مشکلات کا آسان کرنے والا، اور بے سہارا کی امداد کرنے والا تیرے علاوہ کوئی نہیں ہے۔
فصل على محمد وآله وافتح لي يا رب باب الفرج بطولك۔
لہذا محمد و آل محمد پر رحمت نازل فرما، اور میرے لیے اپنے کرم سے سکون کا دروازہ کھول دے۔
واكسر عني سلطان الهم بحولك وأنلني حسن النظر فيما شكوت۔
اور میری خاطر اپنی قوت سے رنج و غم کا زور توڑ دے. میں نے جس بات کی فریاد کی ہے اس کے لیے اپنی بہترین نظر عنایت فرما دے.
وأذقني حلاوة الصنع فيما سألت وهب لي من لدنك رحمة وفرجا هنيئا.
اور جس چیز کا سوال کیا ہے اس میں بہترین سلوک فرما اور مجھے اپنی طرف سے رحمت اور خوشگوار سکون عطا فرما.
واجعل لي من عندك مخرجا وحيا ولا اشغلني بالاهتمام عن تعاهد فروضك.
اور مشکلات سے نکلنے کا فوری راستہ بتا دے. مجھے مشکلات کی فکر میں مبتلا ہو کر واجبات کے خیال
واستعمال سنتك فقد ضقت لما نزل بي يا رب ذرعا.
اور مستحبات کے استعمال سے غافل نہ ہونے دینا کہ میں اس نازل ہونے والی مصیبت کی بنا پر تنگ دل ہو گیا ہوں.
وامتلأت بحمل ما حدث علي هما وأنت القادر على كشف ما منيت به.
اور اس حادثے کا بوجھ اٹھانے کی بنا پر رنج و غم سے بھر گیا ہوں اور تو اس بلا کے ٹالنے پر قادر ہے جس میں میں مبتلا ہو گیا ہوں.
ودفع ما وقعت فيه فافعل بي ذلك وإن لم أستوجبه منك يا ذا العرش العظيم.
اور اس مصیبت کو دفع کر سکتا ہے جس میں واقع ہو گیا ہوں تو اب یہ کرم فرما دے اگرچہ میں اس کا حقدار نہیں ہوں. اے عرش عظیم کے مالک.
Assalamu alaikum mu'minin and mu'minat. Our daily Ramadan programs are going on since the beginning of this month. We start our programs at 6:45 p.m. with the tilawat of Quran Pak, and the English speech is before the Namaz Maghribain, and the Urdu speech is after Namaz Maghribain. After the Azan of Maghrib, we give a pause of around 45 minutes every day and start the Urdu majlis after that, Urdu speech. And these days are the ayyam of shahadat of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Today is the third majlis, and in that today is the third majlis of that series, and inshallah after the announcements we are going to have a small 5-minute clip of from the fundraising committee of the new building project, and after that inshallah Maulana Sayyid Zaki Bakri is going to speak to you in Urdu. So now we are going to have the
السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ۔ شب قدر 21 محرم، یعنی شب 21 محرم، شب نزول قرآن، شب شہادت مولا امیر المومنین علی ابن ابی طالب علیہ افضل الصلاۃ والسلام۔ نزول قرآن کے اعتبار سے قرآن کی یہ آیت ہے، آمنوا باللہ ورسولہ وانفقوا مما جعلکم مستخلفین فیہ فالذین آمنوا منکم وانفقوا لهم اجرا کبیرا۔ سورہ حدید 57واں سورہ اور آیت نمبر 7۔ اللہ پر ایمان لائیے اور رسول پر ایمان لائیے، یعنی ایمان اسٹیٹک نہیں ہے، ڈائنامک ہے۔ ایمان میں رکود و جمود نہیں ہے، مسلسل ترقی ہے، متحرک ہے ایمان۔ انفاق کرو، انفاق صرف مالی نہیں ہوتا، ہنر ہو، جو اللہ مما رزقناکم، جو بھی تمہیں اللہ نے دیا ہے اس کا انفاق کرو۔ کیوں انفاق کرو؟ مما جعلکم مستخلفین فیہ، اللہ نے تمہیں اس دنیا میں مستخلف بنایا ہے۔ اللہ مستخلف ہے، انسان مستخلف ہیں، یعنی ریپریزنٹیٹیو بنایا ہے اللہ نے زمین پر انسان کو، تاکہ وہ انعکاس کر سکے، ریفلیکٹ کر سکے۔ اللہ جواد ہے تو یہ بھی جواد بنے، اللہ عالم ہے تو یہ بھی علم دے، اللہ سخی ہے تو یہ بھی سخی بنے، سخاوت کرے۔ یہ چھوٹی سی مثال ہے، یعنی مستخلف ہے انسان، اور اس کا کامل اگر کوئی مکمل اکمل کوئی نمونہ ہے تو مولا امیر المومنین علی ابن ابی طالب علیہ افضل الصلاۃ والسلام۔ ایک چیز ہمارے ذہنوں میں عموماً یہ ہے کہ مولا امیر المومنین فقیرانہ زندگی بسر کیے ہیں۔ اس کے معنی یہ نہیں ہیں کہ مولا متمکن نہیں تھے، مولا کے پاس مال نہیں تھا۔ 25 سال کے اس دور میں، جس دور میں مولا نے اپنی تحریک کو اس طرح سے کیا ہے کہ زمین کو آباد کیا ہے، 40 چشمے تھے، 1000 کھجور کے درخت تھے۔ مولا نے خود فرمایا ہے کہ بقد یدی، یعنی میرے اپنے ہی ہاتھوں سے کمائی ہوئی پیسے سے، میرا کمایا مال سے میں نے 1000 غلاموں کو خریدا ہے اور بیچا ہے۔ بہت ہی اہم ہے انفاق، چیریٹی۔ مولا فرما رہے ہیں کہ میں نے بیت المال کا مسئلہ نہیں ہے، میرے پاس جو مال تھا اس کے ذریعے سے 1000 غلاموں کو میں نے خریدا ہے اور آزاد کیا ہے۔ اس سے پتہ چلتا ہے نمبر 1، جناب خدیجہ الکبریٰ سے لے کر کے ائمہ معصومین، تمام معصومین علیہم افضل الصلاۃ والسلام، کوئی نادار نہیں تھا، اور وہ اپنی محنتوں کی کمائی کے ذریعے سے انسانوں کی مدد کرتے تھے۔ تو اسلام نے خصوصاً جوان نسلوں کے لیے بہترین ہے، اسلام نے ہمیں یہ نہیں سکھایا ہے کہ فقیرانہ زندگی بسر کریں۔ اسلام نے سکھایا ہے بہترین تاجر بنو، سچے بنو، امین بنو، اور جب بن چکو تو جب خدا نے دیا ہے انفاق کرو۔ اگر انفاق کرو گے، چیریٹی میں دو گے، یہ تقسیم مال جو ہے وہ بہت ہی اہم مسئلہ ہے۔ لیکن آج کی شب خیر خیرات بہت ہی اہم ہے۔ کیوں اہم ہے؟ اس لیے کہ آج شب قدر بھی ہے اور شب شہادت مولا امیر المؤمنین بھی۔ آج وہ جا رہا ہے جو یتیموں کا رکوالی تھا، بیواؤں کا خیال کرتا تھا، بے کسوں کا خیال کرتا تھا۔ راتوں کو کوئی دنیا کا حاکم ہمیں نہیں ملتا، راتوں میں بازاروں میں جائے، گلیوں میں پھرے، یہ صرف اس لیے کہ کہیں کوئی بھوکا نہ سویا ہو۔ صلی اللہ علیہ یا مولایا یا امیر المؤمنین، أعظم الله أجورنا أجوركم باستشهاد مولى أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب عليه أفضل الصلاة والسلام.
نجف کی طرح نکل جائے تو جو کلام کروں آیتوں میں ڈھل جائے علی کا نام نہیں ہے یہ جنتی پھل ہے زبان پہ آئے تو منہ کا مزہ سلام کی چند اشعار حدیث سماعت ہیں بآواز بلند نعرہ الصلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد. جنگ کا منظر مصطفیٰ دیکھا کیے جنگ کا منظر احد میں مصطفیٰ دیکھا کیے ربانی میں شان لافتہ دیکھا کیے جنگ کا منظر احد میں مصطفیٰ ہو رہا تھا پاک بیت کبریا دیکھا کیے مرتضیٰ توڑا کیے موت مصطفیٰ دیکھا کیے جنگ کا منظر احد میں مصطفیٰ دیکھا کیے جن کی لفظوں پر نظر تھی وہ تلاوت میں رہے اور ہم وجہ نزول عطا دیکھا کیے جنگ کا منظر احد میں مصطفیٰ دیکھا کیے خود کی جانب ہمیں کھینچا کیا رضوان ادھر ہم ادھر مڑ مڑ کے سوئے کربلا دیکھا کیے جنگ کا منظر احد میں مصطفیٰ دیکھا کیے میری تربت میں نہ کی رہے آکے بے خود ہو گئے کچھ نہ پوچھا سرائے خاک شفا دیکھا کیے کچھ نہ پوچھا سرائے خاک شفا دیکھا کیے جنگ کا منظر احد میں مصطفیٰ دیکھا کیے تیر کھایا اور اصغر مسکرا کر چل بسے دیر تک شبیر روئے میں لقا دیکھا کیے جنگ کا منظر احد میں سورہ فاتحہ نظر شہداء کے بسم اللہ یک بار کے یہ ہاتف غیبی نندی ندا مسجد میں قتل ہو گئے صد حیف مرتضی سن کر خبر یہ زینب مضطر نے کی دعا رے بابا کی میرے خیر ہو اے رب دو سرا دشمن زمانہ ہو گیا آل رسول بچا یتیم سے صدقہ بطول کا، یا رب بچا یتیم سے صدقہ بطول کا، القصہ زخمی باپ کو لے کر چلے پسر، شبر نے سر کو تھاما تو شبیر نے کمر، پہنچے قریب در تو پکارے بچا روئے نہ اب کوئی میرے ماتم میں پیٹ کر، ممکن نہیں کہ سن کے اسے گھر میں کر ارے زینب نہ سر کھلے ہوئے باہر نکل، زینب نہ سر کھلے ہوئے باہر نکل پڑے، بستر پہ لیٹ کر جو ہوئے غش ہے زینب لپٹ کے باپ سے روئی بشور شور بکا بلند تھا مولا کے جان بے، ارے عباس پائے تھی تو سرہانے حسن حسین، زینب یہ رو کے کہتی تھی نانا دہائی ہے، ارے ہم کو یتیم کرنے اجل گھر میں آئی ہے، ہم کو یتیم کرنے اجل گھر میں آئی ہے، ارے مولا کی آنکھ کھل گئی زینب کے بین سے، کہنے لگے کہ بیٹی نا روش و روشین سے، ارے واللہ کم ہے میری مصیبت حسین سے، اکثر سنا ہے ہم نہ رسول حنین سے، اکثر سنا ہے ہم نے رسول حنین سے، جب ہوں گے یہ شہید نہ ہوں گے رسول بھی، ارے میں بھی جنا میں ہوں گا حسن بھی بطول بھی، میں بھی جنا میں ہوں گا حسن بھی بطول بھی، یہ کہہ کے خود بھی رونے لگے شاہ لافتہ، آنکھوں میں شے کے پھر گئی تصویر کربلا، وہ بے کسی حسین کی وہ تیر حرملا، ایک آہ بھر کے نام اللہ دار کا लिया चादर का जिक्र करते ही खामोश हो गए ज़ैनब के सर को देख के बेहोश हो गए ज़ैनब के सर को देख के बेहोश हो गए एक बार ये हातिफ़े
Assalamu alaikum, Mu'minun and Mu'minat. Welcome back again. As I have been announcing that we require a lot of subscriptions on our YouTube channel since we have started fresh from the beginning of Ramadan. Our subscription photo, when you go on to the YouTube, looks like this. So look for this because there are other Al-Mahdi community center YouTube channels on the YouTube as well. So please look for this icon or this photo and make sure that you go to subscribe and also click on the bell icon so that whenever we start our programs you get the notifications. And now please recite Surah Fatiha for the marhum, the names of the marhumin I am taking and all the marhumin of the viewers who are right now listening and viewing our program. Sayyida Manzoor Fatima, Sayyida Hafiz Zahra Bukhari, Nadeem Bukhari, Sayyid Nasir Raza, Kaniz Hassan, Muzaffar Ahsan, Akbari Khatun, marhumin of Sajjad Ansari, marhumin of Rabab and Jafar Musawi, Sayyid Qasim Hassan, Hashimi Begum, Sayyid Wafi Ahmad, Sayyid Iftikhar, Sayyid Ali Hassan, Maryam Bibi, marhumin of Kambar Raza, marhumin of Amina Bhatt, marhumin of Lubna and Sadiq Zaidi. And stay tuned for a very brief video from our fundraising committee, and after that inshallah Maulana Sayyid Zaki Bakri is going to address you.
هيدر هيدر عم الآخر هيدر 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 صوغي كوثر هيدر 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 أي مظلوم فاتح هيدر هيدر فاتح خيبر هيدر 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 عم الآخر هيدر 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 صوغي كوثر هيدر 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 أي مظلوم فاتح هيدر هيدر فاتح خيبر هيدر 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 عبد الآخر هيدر هيدر صافي هيدر هيدر أي مظلوم فاتح هيدر هيدر فاتح خيبر افتادی در بستر زهرا بابا افتادی در بستر زهرا بابا چشمات از عشق
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As heartbreaking and grief-filled as these days are right now that we are experiencing, going through, it is for us a golden opportunity to learn about the legacy of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And one area of his life that is well documented is his generosity and his charity towards those around him. Sheikh Saduq narrates a beautiful story that once Imam Ali was watching a woman trying to carry a water skin or a jug of water per se that appeared to be quite heavy for her. He approaches her and says, "Can I help you bring it to your home?" She says, "Of course, that'd be very nice of you." He brings the water inside and realizes there is no man inside the house. It's her and her kids. So he inquires about her husband, "Why are you by yourself?" And she says, of course, not recognizing the Imam, that my husband was summoned by Imam Ali to fight in the war of Siffin, and that's where he gave his life. And I've been alone since. Imam Ali, now the story says that he went back home that night, but is very restless, his heart breaking for her state. The next morning, he took some meat, took some flour, took some dates, and made his way back to the woman's house. After reminding her, I'm the same man that brought the water home for you last night. I'm here to help you with the kids perhaps. He then says, look, either you cook the meat and I'll play with the kids, or you look after the kids and I'll begin to cook the meal. She says, no, let me cook the meal and you go ahead. So Imam Ali now, and the report said that he became a child with the children. When it came time now for them to light the fire source, she couldn't do it. Imam Ali now comes on his hands and knees, begins to light the fire source, begins to now knead the bread, begins to now cook the meat. And the whole time now talking to the children about forgiveness, when finally a neighbor sees inside the home and sees that Amir al-Mu'mineen, the Imam of the time, the leader of the Muslim Ummah now, is sitting there kneading dough and playing with the kids. And so that woman approaches the woman of the house and says, do you not know who this is? She says, no, I have no idea. This is Amir al-Mu'mineen. This is Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam. She goes begging for his forgiveness. Mawla, I had no idea it was you. Please forgive me for my shortcomings. I was very direct with you. And he says that no, it is I that needs your forgiveness if I have wronged you, if I have now done anything wrong. This generosity, the softness of the heart of Imam Ali, coupled with the fact that he looked to help out whenever he could, was his generosity. My sisters and my brothers, we need to find that avenue of generosity inside of us, be it the help of a project, be it the help with the family. Generosity in Islam is not to give to the ones who ask. That's a very noble cause, no doubt. But true generosity, the Sira of Imam Ali, the emulation of Imam Ali's path, is to give to those before they ask. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
هيدر هيدر عم الآخر هيدر 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 صوبي كوثر هيدر 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 أي مظلوم فاتح هيدر هيدر فاتح خيبر هيدر 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 عم الآخر هيدر
इंशाल्लाह मौलाना की से तकरीर शुरू होने वाली है और राइट नाउ वी आर डिसकंटिन्यूइंग आवर ट्रांसमिशन ऑन द Mahdi youth channel and people who are watching on the youth channel are requested to come to our main YouTube channel. Haider Musavi and sister Tahira are requested to send the links on YouTube. Thank you. Maulana. मौलाना आपकी आवाज़ म्यूटेड है. मौलाना आपकी ऑडियो म्यूटेड है. मौलाना आपकी आवाज़ म्यूटेड है, आवाज़ नहीं आ रही है.
اب دیکھو ٹھیک. السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ. افوض امری الی اللہ ان اللہ بصیر بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة الا باللہ العلی